All right, everyone, welcome back. So we're super excited to begin today's webinar. My name is Grace, and I'm the marketing manager at PubNub. I'll be joined today by Oz, the product manager for PubNub Functions.
Hi, everyone.
Cool. So we have a lot to review, but again, don't worry about taking notes too much because as a follow-up, we'll be sending this presentation to you so you can go through it at your own pace. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's presentation. As far as our agenda goes, I'll be giving a quick introduction to PubNub before Oz dives into more details about PubNub functions. He'll be highlighting great use cases and at the end be giving a coding demo with a live Q&A. And as a reminder, you're more than welcome to submit questions, but we'll be answering those for the last 15 minutes. And to give you a little bit more information about PubNub, since our inception about 7 years ago, PubNub has really established ourselves as a leading global data stream network, providing real-time infrastructure as a service. Currently, we have about 150,000 developers and 2,000 plus customers all around the world. PubNub's value really derives from our highly reliable, always-on, and secure network that delivers quarter-second latency with end-to-end encryption. At the end of the day, though, PubNub is built by developers and it's for developers. We understood how painful and costly it is to build out a robust backend infrastructure, and with that in mind, we've built that for you. So we'll build and scale your infrastructure so you can just focus on building great products that get to market faster. The core of PubNub's real-time infrastructure, though, is built on PubSub. But in addition to that, we offer a number of robust real-time features, including mobile push, storage and playback, and etc. All of these features are reinforced by high levels of security and also analytics dashboard for monitoring. There are so many different use cases for PubNub's data stream network, but some of our most common use cases are chat and collaboration, IoT device control, and real-time updates like geolocation tracking. Today, though, we're just going to be focusing on the functions feature, which Oz will go into more detail about. To give you all a little bit more of a scope and scale of where PubNub is today, currently, we're sending over 2 trillion monthly transactions across 330 million unique monthly devices. And we're doing that with quarter-second latencies and 5 nines SLA, which is incredible. Right now, we're able to do that, though, because we have 15 points of presence all around the world. As a developer, it doesn't matter what environment you're building on. We support over 70 SDKs, so PubNub will be able to support you. I know earlier I mentioned that our 3 most common use cases, but we're actually across like 35 different industry verticals. And this includes everything from two-person startups to Fortune 500 companies across social and chat, IoT, online collaboration, and so forth. This diagram just highlights some of our top use cases and customers, which I'm sure are recognizable to you all. And without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to Oz, the man of the hour, who's going to be talking about PubNub functions.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Grace. Some of you may already know that PubNub already had a serverless offering since last year, since 2016. And we would like to announce that we've renamed the PubNub blocks to PubNub functions. This rename was more about actually becoming more descriptive and matching the industry naming. PubNub functions is a serverless microservices infrastructure. It's globally distributed, and it delivers extreme low latencies. In fact, we promise getting you the first line of your code in under 10 milliseconds. Now let's think about this architecture through this diagram real quick. On the left side, you can see the devices, and on both sides of the diagram, you see some devices, and in between, you see the PubNub's real-time network. PubNub functions sit right in the middle and process your data as it runs through the network. This means that we can maintain extreme low latencies while processing your data. And this common use case of publishing data streams and transforming them is very easy with PubNub without having to use any other backend servers. Let's break down the characteristics of functions a little bit further. As we mentioned, PubNub functions sit in the middle of the network, and they process and program your data as they are streaming it. And this removes the necessity of storing your data somewhere before you process it, having your data store and everything. PubNub functions are deployed globally, as Grace mentioned, we have 15 points of presence around the globe. This allows you to go to production scale in minutes, and we run your code globally so that you have low latencies everywhere around the globe. You can trigger PubNub functions via in-network events, such as a publish message to the PubNub network, or by making HTTP calls and triggering REST APIs. And this is actually my favorite part. We have built-in statefulness with PubNub functions, so you don't have to worry about hooking up a database to store your state. And this key value store that we provide is also globally distributed to help with the lower latencies. Last but not least, PubNub functions are what we call enterprise grade. They're supported by our SOC 2 and HIPAA compliances. And they come with out-of-the-box redundancy. What this means is, at any point in time, you don't have to worry about your code freezing or having to be rebooted, restarted. We take care of all of that for you. Let's talk about a couple use cases for functions to clarify their utility a little bit more. Collecting data from the field via IoT devices is a common use case for PubNub because we make it really easy to stream data across the globe. And detecting temperature anomalies in agriculture is a very real use case. PubNub functions is a great infrastructure for doing that. You could set up min, max, and average values that are acceptable to your operation, and then send notifications to yourself or some other third parties using PubNub functions. Real-time updates is a similar but a more powerful example as well, which includes geo-tracking. PubNub is a very strong platform for chat applications, and PubNub functions are a very easy way to incorporate language translation or explicit content filtering into your chat applications. And my favorite part, PubNub functions are a great home for chatbots. This is mostly because functions are backed by a real-time network PubNub operates, which promises a quarter-a-second latency around the globe. Now, another exciting moment. We announced PubNub Functions Endpoints. We're very excited about this feature because up until today, we were only able to trigger PubNub functions via in-network events, such as publishes. But with endpoints, PubNub functions become accessible via REST interfaces, which means you could trigger them from any device without using our SDK or even from a browser context, which I will show you in a little bit. Endpoints also help build this excellent home for your chatbots in the PubNub serverless infrastructure. And another favorite part of mine, it allows you to connect the outside world to any chat application via webhooks, which I will also show a demo about in a minute. Yeah, let's jump into our demos. Our first demo is called Something's Up, and we are going to show you the webhook use case I just talked about. Webhooks are, if you haven't familiar with the concept of webhooks are a way of asynchronously receiving notifications from services. By asynchronous, I mean instead of you making a request to an API to poll for data, you set up a URL endpoint with this service. It could be GitHub or a weather service, and they give you a call when something happens. So let's show how you build something to respond to external live events using PubNub functions. For those of you who haven't seen this screen before, this is the PubNub functions editor. In the middle box, you can see that there's some JavaScript code. At the bottom, there's the console, which will be printing debugging information. And on the left side, right below the running, you see the metadata for our function. The name, followed by the function type, which happens to be on request for this function. And on request is the function type for endpoints. This means that this function will be accessible via REST calls and HTTP calls. The box right under on request is to choose a log level. And at the bottom, you see that this box is for assigning a path to your function, which I will share with you in a second and allow you to actually interact with our function. Right below, right here, under the test payload, we've built a mini HTTP client so that you can debug your code easily as you're building your function, which I will interact with in a second. So let me explain the code now and what it does. Remember, our use case is bringing external live events to PubNub Functions environment and maybe bring them to our network and notify your chat users about this real life event. Some of you may have noticed this is the ES6 JavaScript syntax, and the first line, or rather the second line, but the first meaningful line, we are importing the PubNub module. PubNub module allows us to send a message to the PubNub network, which allows us to distribute that message to millions of devices in cases where you have users, of course. Line 4 is just logging the request object. This is mostly for debugging purposes so that I can show you what the request object looks like and walk over. Line 6, I'm assigning the params object to a variable named params object. And at line 8, we start the meat of the logic. You may have noticed that this is an asynchronous call, or if you're not very familiar with JavaScript, this is what they call promises. JSON parsing in the function infrastructure is done asynchronously. So when we make a call to this function, we have to provide a closure that will be called upon completion of the JSON parsing, and the output will be passed into this closure. So the part that I'm highlighting right now will be called by the JSON parser once the parsing is complete. And the parsed JSON will be passed in with this argument, the body. What we will be doing with this body is we are going to be publishing this meat, the body that comes from the request, into a channel called leaks, and in the format of a message that says, oh my god, super important leak. You may have picked up already where this is kind of a joke on the leaks coming out of government, but these could be leaks coming out of everywhere. Maybe your apartment has some plumbing issues or corporate leaks. Anyways, we'll allow you to interact with this in a second. So now that we have built our function, we have a piece of code that publishes a message to our network, and we have a way of accepting data from the outside via query parameters. Oh, I actually forgot to explain. Request.params will be giving us the query parameters. But let me first send a test request to this function so that I can show you the request object as well. We see some errors here because the expected leaks key is not in the JSON body, and you can see that we show you a notification when your function's having issues. There are errors in your function execution, but of course the console log happened here, so we're still able to see the request object. Clicking the plus here, I expand the object, and here are the keys under it. As you can see the client IP that the request is coming from, the user agent, and the URI that's assigned to your function, and the body, which happens to be null right now, and the headers that you would normally see in a request object. The error thrown here is actually indicative of the fact that we were expecting a post method with the JSON body, but I sent a GET request. Oh, that means we can send all kinds of requests, right? Yes, you guessed right. So I sent a GET request just to actually show you the first interaction with it, but our example actually requires a post request. And when we enable post, you see that this section is now available for interaction, because only post requests actually require a body, or you can actually only use body with a post request. And during other requests, it's disabled. So now I'm going to add a key named leaks, because that's what our function expects, and put a leak in there. For instance, what could that be? My cat turned out to be a dog. That's the leak coming from our home, maybe. So let's send this and see what happens. So as you can see, actually, I'm going to clear this and then execute again so that you can see it better. As you can see, it executed without any errors. Here you can see the response that said OK from line 13. This is how we return the response. The status is 200 by default, and the headers show that it's the content type is text plain. And as you can see, the request object is printed again. Now I'll show you another piece of the PubNub portal that allows you to debug channels, which will allow us to actually understand how this function and the channels work a little bit better. If you go to the PubNub console, at the bottom left, you will see the debug console. Debug console allows you to subscribe to PubNub channels and listen to the messages that are being published as if you're on a device, on a browser, in some other part of the network. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to be removing this client and adding a new client. I specify the channel as the leaks, add the client, and I'll make another publish to show you guys that it's actually working the way I expected. Yeah, here's how our leaks are reported to the network. I'll paste this URL so that you can post any leaks that you would like to bring to our discussion to this URL. Remember, you have to make post requests, and your JSON needs to look like this. It needs to have a key named leaks and the string value attached to it that says the leak that you want to share. So let's bring the chat into view and share this URL with you guys. While you guys have fun with that, I will move to our next demo, and it's called MyWorld. I'm personally very interested in natural language processing, and the fact that chat is a big use case for PubNub makes it a very interesting place to actually run natural language processing. Imagine a chat platform where you can process all the messages going back and forth. Isn't it a great use case for sentiment analysis and building word clouds? That's what I thought, at least. Let's jump into code. I think some of you guys are making post requests with null. Remember, the object needs to look like this. Oh, we're getting some leaks, I think, but they're not really in the, yeah, testing. Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing some properly formatted JSON. I think some of these are formatting errors, but I'll continue with the next demo while you guys play with that. There will be some interaction on this one too, so if you're having trouble with the other one, don't worry about it. Let's just go back with the demos. As I mentioned, we will be building a natural language processing function, which will be counting the frequency of the words appearing in chat messages. And this is a different type of function. It's what's called an after publish or fire function. And this is indicated by the type box again, right here. And After publish means that this function will be triggered after a message is sent to the network in an asynchronous fashion, so you don't have to take a latency hit. And right below here, again, we have a test area, but this time it says publish instead of the get and post, because this is actually a tool for publishing messages to the PubNub network. It's not an HTTP client. And I'm actually going to hit it a couple times to show what happens. See, it actually shows that we are publishing to this channel, and it triggered the code again and dumped the request object. Okay, now I'll go on to explain the code itself. So we start by importing requiring the KV store module. KV store module is the statefulness that we baked in, as I mentioned earlier in my slide. We will be using the KV store to keep the number of the frequencies of the word appearing in chat messages. Here's our standard line, dumping the request object again. And this is where interesting things start. Request.message is the object where the published messages will be stored. So this JSON blob goes into the message object, and it's automatically parsed, so you don't have to worry about the parsing here. And the key under it becomes a key under this object. So when I refer to request.message.mywords, I'm actually referring to the value that comes from a message over here. So I'm running a split on that, assuming most chat messages will be full sentences separated by spaces. I'll split by spaces, and it'll produce something like this. I mean, this is not syntactically correct, but I think you get the idea. And my words will be an array containing the words in the message that's being passed in. The next thing we do is just very simply go over each word in this array and increment a counter in our key value store for that word. Just simple as that. We will be able to keep track of how many, the frequency of words that are being used in our chat ecosystem. Are cats actually dogs? So how do we see the impact of this counting, right? Because it seems like it's just being dumped into a void. Well, in order to show you how you would actually extract the values, I wrote another function, which is also super short and easy. And it's called MyWorld. It's in your view right now. This is another onRequest type function, which means it can be triggered by HTTP requests, REST calls. And the code here is very simple. We require the KV store because we want to get information out of it. And again, we're relying on the query parameters for accepting incoming values. And what we do here is we take the word key in the params object, which will include the key, the word that we are querying the database for, and we're making an asynchronous request to the KV store. Again, so for those of you who aren't familiar with asynchronous calls or promises, this get counter call will execute and move on. And what it expects is a then clause that it follows, that's followed by, and a closure inside the then clause, so that it can give us a callback with the response, with the output, when it's done executing. In this case, it will go to the KV store, query for the word that we're passing in, get the value from our database, and pass it into this closure. And all this closure does is really to return that to us in a response. So let's query for dog, for instance. Actually, query parameters just go in here. Word equals dog. Or did I say dogs? I actually don't remember what I passed in. Let's just check that. Are cats actually dogs? Yes, I said dogs. We hit get. You see that? Are cats actually dogs? I actually caught a bug in my code. Remember how we split by spaces? So dogs was actually split with the question mark. Very common bug. So let's look for cats instead to see that it actually worked. See that the body returns 1. The frequency of that word was counted. And if I go back and actually publish another message, no, cats are not dogs. Maybe we are very curious about the fact that if our users are talking about cats enough or at all, this way we know that what words are used more frequently, what words are used less frequently, and build a very quick and easy sentiment analysis application. I will also share this URL with you guys so you can interact with this if you want. Let's see. So you can make a call and ask for the frequency of cats, I guess. I can publish more messages for you if you like, so that you have a variety of things to ask about. PubNub is awesome. All right, let's look at the debug console to see any. Oh, there are too many links in the DC vote, someone said, and others sent a lot of undefined leaks. Orange is a tremendous color. Best color. Okay. What is the difference between this and Azure Functions? Wow. Creative way to submit questions. That's awesome. GG. I'm assuming this is good game. Yeah, we love real-time stuff too. Awesome. Thank you for all the messages that you've sent through the function that we built. I think we can move on to Q&A, so we can actually answer your questions the proper way.
Yeah, guys. So just by the way, Oz gave us a great demo, but just as a reminder, you guys have access to this as well. We have PubNub has an amazing free tier, 100 devices, 1 million messages. So go ahead and get your hands on it too. So in the meantime, you guys have sent us some awesome questions. So I'll be reading some of these questions out, and we'll put Oz on the spot to answer them. So Oz, is one of the first questions from None. Is KV store persistent within keyset or project?
I love the asker's name.
None is the name.
It's persistent. To answer your question, the way you worded it, it's persistent within the key set, but I think I usually explain it by saying that it's scoped per key set. So different keys will have different scope or namespaces, maybe and might be an easier way to understand for others. But the answer is key set, not project.
So from Alexander, he wants to know what is pricing for blocks?
Oh, thank you for
functions.
I'm glad you asked that actually. We have a free tier that gives you 1 million executions. I would urge you to go take advantage of that and really, build something that you want to take to production. I think our plans are very, very convenient to build something and take to production very quickly.
Awesome. And from Anmol, is KV Store similar to Redis?
You could think of, Redis is data structure server. Redis is I think I would say Redis is more powerful than the KV Store. But having said that, the KV Store supports JSON objects, so it's very similar. you would interact with it the same way, but we don't support data types like lists and dictionaries in the database layer. I hope that was clear. Please ask again if that wasn't clear.
So a question from Sudhir. Are the messages published using some secure method?
Oh, yes. Actually, the entire PubNub network is behind a VPC and in an encrypted environment. So all your messages are securely being transported from one end to the other. Within the functions, when you modify them, you might be able to break out of the security, but that's basically how we operate with data using functions. But we urge you to actually, you could also be encrypting within the function after the fact. So our security story is pretty tight, but it's also very detailed. Maybe you could contact us to actually talk about that more offline.
So another question for Amol. How are the environment variables set in the function?
That's a very good question. We currently do not support any way of setting environment variables in the function, but I don't quite follow what you would need that for. So if you could clarify your use case, like why would you need environment variables, that would help me understand a little better, and maybe I can help you. I can help you understand how you could do it with functions.
So a question from Bhavna. You mentioned redundancy. What happens if my modules or whatever you execute on my code and crashes?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? What happens
if my module or whatever you execute on it crashes?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So all runtimes are subject to crashes, and the way we handle distributed systems as computer scientists is just by restarting them. But with PubNub Functions, we abstract away that problem for you, and we have replicas running in each data center around the world. And when one of them crashes or something happens to it, the other one will take over immediately. So you won't be able to experience any downtime, nor you will be required to trigger a restart or a reboot of any sort, because it's all handled automatically.
From Al, can you explain for mobile applications?
Sure. I would actually appreciate if it was a bit, you could provide more detail on what type of mobile applications. But so one use case could be you could be publishing to a channel, a chat participant in a mobile application, and you could be translating the language in our network without actually having to hit a server, and your other mobile users would actually be reading the chat message in their own language. I think that question would require a little bit more detail. Unfortunately, that's the best I can do.
Yes, and just as a reminder, some of you guys are asking some awesome questions. PubNub provides architecture consultants for free. So if there's something that you want to talk a little bit more in detailed use cases about, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, and we're happy to get those scheduled for you. So the next question from Sudhir. Can we use Python instead of JavaScript?
Thanks for asking. I'm glad you asked that, actually. We have plans to incorporate Python into our serverless infrastructure. It's tentatively on our roadmap, so stay tuned.
From Samuel, how is it different from Azure Functions?
I believe PubNub Functions would be way more responsive compared to Azure Functions, and because they execute within our network, so we promise way lower latency. As it is consistent with the rest of our low latency real-time offerings, Functions deliver the lowest latency in the Functions offerings in the market right now.
A question from Akshay. How can somebody use PubNub for their applications?
It's a very open-ended question, and I appreciate that actually. So for your applications, you could use PubNub as a communication layer, basically for any kind of message passing between different devices. We commonly talk about the chat use case, but it doesn't really need to be chat between people. You could be passing state and information or signals between your devices. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, from Prasad, how are PubNub functions helpful for IoT use cases?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that actually. So a lot of IoT use cases involve processing of some data in some aggregate form. The example that I mentioned in the slide was collecting temperature data from the field and reacting to anomalies, right? You could also be watching out for signals and send certain notifications or make some programmatic calls to third parties in response to these signals. So IoT devices are used for a variety of use cases, right? I mentioned the streaming in of data from the field, but you could also be just watching for signals, like a security camera that sees someone in your apartment. So you could be using functions to not only distribute it to multiple parties, maybe you and your landlord and the police, they will all be notified at the same time, but you could also store these in a database maybe for archive purposes, for evidence reasons.
So just a quick little side note. So the person who asked about the difference between Microsoft and PubNub functions, we just got a short answer from one of our architects. He says completely different use cases with Microsoft functions. We actually don't compete with them. We complement them in a lot of ways. We're used for fast-moving and low latency intensive functions. So it's very complementary. And again, we'd love to hear more about your use cases. So feel free to reach out to us and we can go into more details. And our architects who are online can definitely help to answer more of these questions directly suited for your individual use cases. So let's move on with some of these questions. These are awesome. Is it possible to build native PubNub server for this project like Eon?
I don't follow what do you mean by native PubNub server, but we do not do anything that would allow you to access native with PubNub functions, unfortunately.
From the next question, can we have Cipher Keys enabled at channel level?
Certainly, yeah. So Cipher Keys are actually wouldn't be part of. You would be choosing your Cipher key based on your channel yourself, because we are behind secure lines to protect our network, but you would be encrypting your code yourself. So I think you would do that on the client side or within the functions if you'd like to encrypt it once it's in the network.
So another question from None. How do you control the scope lifetime of the webhook?
That's a great question, actually, and I can just show you that. Lifetime of the function is managed by these two buttons. You hit stop, and it stops, and you hit start, it starts. Just easy as that. And you make a change over here. Let's say we decide to split on the pipe character. We save it, and then here we're notified that our module is currently running with an older version because we just changed and saved it, and we hit restart. It's deployed around the globe, just like that.
Easy.
I'm glad you asked that question.
So, question from Gopal. Any restrictions on size of objects stored in KV store or on number of objects?
We currently do not have a limit on the number of objects, but I think the size would be 32 kilobytes.
Yeah, same question from Nanan. How much space do we have in the KV store set? So,
yeah, currently it's we don't really have a limit on it.
Can we have Cipher Keys enabled at channel level?
I think we answered that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. If I read and write JSON from the KV store, is there a lock during that process, or can multiple read writes lead to data being overwritten? From Aaron.
That's a great question, Aaron. Yeah, race conditions are possible. There won't be any locking. We provide atomic counters, which I used in my demo, to increment and decrement values, but no other locking would be provided by the KV store.
Jahendra, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but it says where all the required PubNub libraries are on the local server, not PubNub server. For that question?
I don't follow. Well, the functions runtime includes the PubNub libraries already, so maybe that's what you were asking about, I'm hoping.
So from Alan, what are some great beginner projects to understand PubNub functions more?
I would recommend the sentiment analyzer, but that's because I have interest in natural language processing. Some other beginner, you could check out our blocks catalog. I think there is a language translation block that's really fun to work with. So it's not less natural language processing, more a real life use case.
Yeah, so we have some great partners that we work with that you have access to all of their.
Yeah, there are a lot of use cases that are implemented in the blocks catalog on PubNub.com. I'd urge you to check it out.
From Jay, can a function connect to outside resources like a RabbitMQ server or HTTP request?
That's a great question. Thank you, Jay. A RabbitMQ server, I believe that would be a TCP connection. Unless you have an HTTP endpoint for that, you wouldn't be able to connect to RabbitMQ, although you can make HTTP requests out. And for so like HTTP, outgoing HTTP is okay. Outgoing TCP, not okay. Not yet anyways. That we have some tentative roadmap items that would allow that, but not today.
Question from Deepa. Don't you have a real-time gateway with Microsoft Azure?
We do, yes. Yeah, we do.
Jim, why should I use PubNub instead of AWS Lambda, Google Cloud Function, or Azure Functions? Depends on the use case.
That's a great question, actually. It would depend on the use case and also how much time you're willing to put into setting it up. You know, I've worked with both of them, and AWS Lambda, you still do a lot of DevOps. You have to put API gateway in front of it. You have to do all the settings right before you can actually start sending requests. And I'm guessing if you're really fast and well versed in all AWS, a minimum of 2 hours compared to 5 minutes with PubNub. So I don't have the patience. That's why I would go with PubNub.
And the other thing is, like, PubNub really, we're like the Switzerland of networks. There are instances where you can use a combination of PubNub and Azure or Lambda. I mean, so it really depends on what use case you're looking for. And, you know, like I mentioned before, our architects, that's what they're here to do. They're here to learn more about, you know, your project and your client needs. So we can help kind of architect that to what's most favorable for you.
I think Prasad was asking how can we access the functions.
Oh yeah, cool. Prasad was asking how can we access the functions.
Prasad, just go to PubNub.com and you know, find functions. They are part of the free tier, and 1 million executions are available within the free tier, and the URL is on the screen right now.
Yeah, so on the screen you can see the link to get started.
I think Mauricio was asking if you can watch the webinar later. Yes, we will be sharing.
Absolutely can. Yeah, we'll be sending the recording of it to you as a follow-up. So from None again. I don't know if this is one person or there's many people with None.
None, my good friend.
Is it possible to store data to our own database? MySQL.
Unfortunately, not possible as of today, unless you have an HTTP endpoint in front of it, because connections to MySQL would be TCP, and currently we do not support TCP connections out of our functions infrastructure, but I want to say pretty soon. Although I recently discovered a MySQL database that supports HTTP requests. It's called RESTDB. So maybe you can check it out, and maybe it helps your use case.
Yeah, so one of the things that I just sent to the chat box, guys, is the blocks catalog. So you guys are more than welcome to take a look at it, and that's kind of where it highlights all of our partners. So any of you guys who are interested in trying it out, you have access to all of these amazing tools from IBM Watson for text-to-speech, Clarify, image and recognition, or Esri geo-enrichment. I mean, there's so much to play with here. From Luciano, in KB Store, what's the space limit and how complex structures can we build?
You can store any JSON object. Really, the complexity is irrelevant to the KB Store because it just sees them as string values.
So, Aaron, if I read...
We answered
that one. Why is it important for PubNub to have 17-digit time tokens as standard Java script only supports 10 to 13?
That's a great question, and that should give you an idea about how precisely we monitor our latency. So the precision you're talking about is milliseconds, I believe, but we measure things at the microsecond level. So I believe I'm getting those units right. So yeah, we need the extra precision to actually monitor our latencies. That's the reason.
Prasad, what is the security mechanism used to access functions?
So functions endpoints are HTTPS, just out of the box. You don't have to do anything, and the security mechanism for accessing, you could build basic authorization. They are basically HTTP handlers that you can do whatever you want with. You could have a session token that you validate. You could have basic authentication that you could accept username and password. The world's your oyster. It's a HTTP handler. You can do whatever you want with.
From Vivek, what are other various channels that can be accessed? Name some other than links.
Oh, currently, well, so you can access the, we built an HTTP endpoint that would allow you to publish messages to a channel. Normally, you wouldn't be able to publish messages to other people's channels. They would have to share their publish key with you. And I don't think it would be appropriate for me to share my publish key with you because then I wouldn't be able to use that key in my future demos. I mean, I could just delete it, but I think that would detract us from the rest of the questions since we have 6 minutes left.
Yeah, so wow, we got a lot more questions to go through. And again, if we can't get through all of these questions in the last 3 minutes, we'd love to hear all these questions and help you get the right answer. So take our emails down, and you can always, of course, reach out to support@pubnub.com. We'll have all the answers to these as well. But we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. From Samuel, what other languages are supported? Like right now, he can do C#, Node, and Azure.
Yeah, currently we only support JavaScript. JavaScript being one of the leading programming languages in the world, and yeah, the increasing number of people that are using JavaScript, we prefer to start with JavaScript. Python is also on the horizon. I am not sure if we would do C#. Possible, but Python is a sooner reality, I would say.
So can you explain the difference between functions and the blocks catalog?
Oh, sure, yeah. The blocks catalog is a catalog of little building blocks, if you will, that you could use to build your applications. And functions is the serverless microservices infrastructure that PubNub operates. So you could have some blocks that are appropriate for the functions infrastructure, and even if we may not have it today, in the future we will have other blocks that are not so much for the functions infrastructure, but for setting up gateways and other things, perhaps.
Can I set environment variables to secure API keys in the function if I'm calling like some third-party API?
Amal, thank you for asking that question. Actually, you wouldn't have to do that because we have a feature that's coming out very shortly. We're currently working on it, and we're getting ready to launch it. It's called Vault. It's basically a secret store that that would allow you to store your secrets in an encrypted fashion and access them from the functions runtime. I had the hunch that you were asking about that the first time someone asked about it. Maybe it's the same person. I had that hunch, but yes. So you don't need the environment variables. We will allow you to store your secrets in an encrypted fashion and only decrypt it at the time your function is executing. So it won't ever be stored in a fashion that's unencrypted.
From none, is it possible to define max request limit per second from the same IP?
That's a great question, actually.
More architects might be able to.
I'm not sure if you could do that. So you could be rejecting calls from the IPs because I mean you're getting the IP in the metadata field, right? Like we provide user agent and the IP of the device that's making the request. So you could store that in the data store, count the number of requests that's being made, and if it's greater than a certain number, you could just drop those requests, right? Not process the data and just return by saying that you exceeded your the number of requests.
All right, for the final question from Jay, what kind of monitoring of invocation count, duration, etc. is available?
Great question. Currently, we do not expose these stats, but it's definitely on the roadmap. Currently, you would only get number of executions. We have a dashboard in our portal. You will be able to see that, but you wouldn't be able to see duration.
Actually, I think we have time for one more. It's 2 minutes. Okay, I tried PubNub Debug Console. I've observed that revoking grants is taking about 5 minutes. Why is that so? Shouldn't it be immediate?
I'm not sure if this is related to functions, but that might be an edge case or a bug. Why don't you contact us at support@pubnub.com so we can actually look into that a bit more closely.
Okay, all right, guys. I'm sorry we're not able to answer the rest of the questions since our time is up for today, but as I mentioned before, you're more than welcome to contact myself or Oz. Our emails are grace@pubnub.com. Oz is oz@pubnub.com, and also support@pubnub.com is available for any of your questions. And as I mentioned once more, if you guys have a real-time project that your company is working on that you think that this could be valuable for, I'm more than happy to schedule time with our solutions architects who can really go into a deep dive session with you guys. So feel free to reach out to us. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you all.
Thanks for making it, guys.